Hello, and welcome to the Community IT Innovators Technology Topics Podcast, where we discuss nonprofit technology, cybersecurity, tech project implementation, strategic planning, and nonprofit IT careers. Find us at communityit.com.
I think that's what we need to do.
Yeah. Okay. Can I have that conversation?
Okay. Yeah, just like, what is it? Because, we're not a co-op. Welcome, everyone, to Community IT Innovators Technology Topics Podcast. I'm Carolyn Woodard, the host, and I'm excited today to talk to our CEO, Johan Hammerstrom, about ESOP month. So, Johan, can you introduce yourself?
Yes. Thank you, Carolyn. I'm Johan, CEO of Community IT, and happy to be here.
And I said ESOP, and it's ESOP month, but what is an ESOP?
ESOP stands for Employee Stock Ownership Plan, and an ESOP is a specific form of employee ownership. So employee ownership is a arrangement by which the employees of a business have some ownership stake in that business. People may be familiar with worker cooperatives, which is a different form of employee ownership. I think they were particularly popular in the 70s, and particularly at, health food stores, grocery stores.
Yeah, I think there's some pretty famous ones people know, though, like Cabot. Dairy is a co-op. Land of Lakes, I think, is also a co-op. So it kind of makes sense in that case where it's like a dairy that's produced, like lots of dairies get together and are producing something, and they all own the company. They vote on what the direction is going to be and where they're going to go. But an ESOP is not a co-op.
An ESOP is not a co-op, and I'm not as familiar with worker co-ops, so I don't want to speak at length about how they work. But typically, employees, have a vote in the direction of the company and share in the equity of the company, sort of directly.
But an ESOP, like you have explained it to me a couple of different times, it came from this tax reform back in the day. But I would be interested, I think people might be interested in, for Community IT, we had a founder who was the owner, and he sold, quote unquote, sold the company to the employees over a period of time. And so can you talk a little bit about that journey? Like why did he decide to pass on ownership that way?
Yeah, so ESOPs are a specific form of employee ownership that, as you mentioned, Carolyn, was passed into law in 1974 as part of ERISA, which is the Retirement Savings Act that established 401ks, 403bs, sort of all of the contemporary forms of retirement that we have were included in ERISA in 1974. I think prior to that, most retirement plans were pension-based plans where large entities like corporations or other types of businesses would save money for their employees and then pay it out, in a pension, sort of a defined benefit plan. And if you didn't work for a company that had a pension system, you're kind of out of luck. You had to save your own money for retirement, or count on Social Security, at the time. So 401ks were established as a way of incentivizing employees to save for their own retirement, and then also providing some options for employers to contribute to the employee savings. So it may sound strange that ESOPs were formed as part of this Retirement Savings Act, but it actually makes sense when you understand the structure of an ESOP, which is basically a form of beneficial ownership. So anyone who works for an ESOP, and there are a lot of ESOPs, so Ben and Jerry's, they were actually an ESOP as well.
My son
United
worked
Airlines.
for Wawa.
Wawa,
is an
yes,
ESOP.
Wawa is an ESOP. It's a large one. Only like 1 or 2% of all businesses in the United States are ESOPs, so it's a pretty small percentage of businesses. But many of our listeners may have worked at an ESOP in the past, or maybe working for an ESOP now. And when you work for an ESOP, you get a share of the value of the company, the worth of the company. In most traditional businesses, small businesses especially, there's a founder who starts the company, and they typically own 100%, of the company, and the employees get paid a salary, but they're not sharing in the wealth, that's being created as part of the company. So the ESOP structure is intended to create a way for employees to share in the wealth that's being generated by the business.
So can you talk a little bit about our founder, David Deal?
Oh yeah, yes, thank you.
When he came he started a different company and he wanted to pass on ownership. He could have sold the company. He could have, there's a couple different paths to getting out from being the owner of a company, but he chose to transfer it through this ESOP process.
Yeah, so if you're a small business owner and you've founded a company and you've grown it and it's worth something, typically you've invested a lot of your own money, certainly a lot of your time in building up the company, and you want to get a return on that investment. And there are a number of different ways for small business owners to do that. One of the more common ways, one possibility is you just keep the business, and then you maybe aren't involved in the day-to-day operations, but you're overseeing it, and you're drawing money from the profits of that business. So
Like
that's
succession, like who's going to take over of your children?
yeah, succession. Succession is kind of it kind of plays fast and loose with certain business concepts. Succession's interesting because Waystar is a publicly owned company. Logan Roy is always concerned about, and Kendall, they're always concerned about what's happening with the stock. And so that's a feature of a publicly owned company. But the succession also sort of deals with Waystar as if it's a family-owned business. And that's kind of the second thing that happens with small businesses. The owner will give the business to their children to run the business, and that's not uncommon for businesses to sort of be inherited by offspring. That typically doesn't happen. I mean, that doesn't happen with publicly owned businesses, and that was kind of the central tension in some ways of succession. Is it's a publicly owned business. Another common way for owners to kind of realize the value of their investment of time and money is to sell the business to somebody else. And there are a lot of people out there who are interested in just buying and running businesses, individual sort of independent business owners who are just interested in finding good businesses, buying them, and then building them up. So that's one possible buyer. If you're in an industry that's consolidating, which is the case in some ways with the industry that we're in, a larger business that does similar work to your business might be interested in buying the business and paying the owner to acquire the business.
I have a friend here who was a business owner and wanted to retire, and she actually spent a couple of years looking for someone to buy her business and ended up not being able to find anyone, so she just closed it.
Yeah, that happens too. Like if you can't find someone to buy your business, you end up just closing it, liquidating the assets, and being done with it. But in some cases, owners will sell the business to the employees, which is kind of somewhat. It's not a super well-known path, for a business owner to go down. Usually, small business owners, when they're looking to sell their business, are looking to get acquired, or they're looking for an investor, maybe private equity, if it's large enough, will come in, and purchase the business from them. But it's possible for the small business owner or even large, it's possible for the business owner to sell the business to the employees. It doesn't happen very often, which is why there's only, 1 to 2% of all businesses or ESOPs. Maybe it might be less than that. But when it does, it creates a great opportunity for the employees of the business to share in the wealth that's being generated by the business. So that was a decision that our founder, David Deal, an original owner, made back in 2005. And interestingly enough, the main reason that he made that decision is he was worried about succession. He was worried about what would happen to him, uh, what would happen to the company if something were to happen to him, if if he were unavailable to run the company, it would pass to his wife. She didn't want to run a small IT business that focused on nonprofits in Washington, D.C. So what would she do with the business? We actually came out of another larger company in the late 90s, and we saw what happened to that business when it was when it was acquired. And we were concerned that our mission of working with nonprofits wasn't going to survive if we were acquired by a larger firm. And so David Deal was, he was very focused on creating a succession structure that would allow for the long-term governance and ownership of the business, while also maintaining the integrity of our mission to work with nonprofit organizations. And he looked around at a lot of different structures for doing that. And the one that he felt was the best was the ESOP, employee ownership structure.
And that, if I recall, that took place over several years, that the shares, as they're called, I mean, they're not publicly traded shares, but they're like how the value of the company is divided up, would then be passed, a few a year for several years over to the employees, kind of like vesting in a public company, but not the same.
It's actually very similar. So in order to be an ESOP, you have to be a corporation. So prior to becoming an ESOP, we were an LLC, a limited liability company that was solely owned by David Deal. You can have LLCs that have a couple of owners, but LLCs don't have shares in the same way that corporations do. And so in order for the ESOP structure to work, the company has to be a corporation because it has to have shares of ownership in the corporation. So we became a corporation in 2005. We had shares created as part of our becoming a corporation. And David Deal ended up on day one, he owned like 95% of the shares. So another thing that just because a business is employee owned doesn't mean it's completely owned by the employees. You can have ESOPs that are still 90% owned by a single owner. 90% of the shares are owned by a single owner, and 10% of the shares are owned by not the employees directly, but by a trust. All ESOPs have an ESOP trust that's formed that holds the shares on behalf of the employee owners. So for many years, from 2005 to 2012, the Community IT Incorporated was still majority owned by David Deal. And then in 2012, he sold all of his shares to the trust, to the ESOP trust. And at that point, we became 100% employee owned, which tends to be, you talk to other ESOPs and go to ESOP conferences, and that's what everybody's looking to be, is 100% employee owned. But there are plenty of good reasons why a corporation might be partially owned by other types of owners and partially owned by the ESOP trust.
And can you talk a little bit about, just to wrap up, now that we are 100% employee owned, I know we have internal board members from employees that serve terms, helping with the direction and strategy of the company. But are there other benefits to being a 100% employee owned ESOP? as an MSP, as serving nonprofits exclusively? I know that you've talked in the past about right now with MSPs, generally, there's a lot of acquisition going on. We have some clients that come to us because the MSP they were using for outsourced IT got acquired, and the quality of the support went downhill. The prices might have gone up. So can you talk a little bit about why it's so important to us and our culture and our mission that we are 100% employee owned?
One of the great benefits, if you're working with an MSP, one of the great benefits of working with a 100% employee-owned ESOP is that in general, the business is interested in its long-term sustainability. And oftentimes what you see among smaller MSPs, MSPs that have, say, 80 staff or fewer, they're often owned by a small group or a single owner, a small group of owners or a single owner, and they're generally interested in maximizing the return on their investment, which right now means, selling to a larger MSP or selling to a private equity firm. And I think, oftentimes in those sales, at least based on our experience, the end result is a reduced, quality of service for the customer, or sometimes a change in what the MSP is focused on, a change in pricing, a change in staffing, and those changes can be very disruptive to the service that's being delivered. Because we're, committed to working with nonprofit organizations in the nonprofit sector, the fact that we're an ESOP means that we're not interested in being acquired. We want to continue to operate as community IT and continue to improve the quality of our services.
And I think that if you, as a more commercially oriented MSP, if profit is your number one reason for being, then you're going to try and maximize your profits. And that might not be the best decision for your clients always.
Yeah, and I think there are a lot of great MSPs out there, and I think it is worth, when you're looking to select an IT support provider, I think it's worth finding out who owns the business, what are their incentives and priorities, how are they running the business? Because that, like you said, Carolyn, that goes, it has a big impact on how well they're going to be providing support over a long period of time. And I think in most cases, when organizations are looking to hire an MSP, they're looking for a long-term partnership. They don't want to have to change their IT support provider every year. They're looking for someone who's going to be a good partner for them for a long period of time. And so understanding the long-term viability of the tech partner that you're hiring is an important part of the selection process.
When we definitely talk a lot, we were just talking about congratulating our staff. We have several staff members who have been with us for over 15 years, over 20 years. And that, I think also the ESOP structure helps that happen. Like, people are really committed to this company, and that allows us to invest in our staff and their knowledge and their, professional development and their understanding of nonprofits, of the clients, that we only work with nonprofits. So when you hire an MSP with that kind of experience and longevity of the staff, they've seen a lot of the challenges that you're encountering. And so they probably have a lot of experience with helping you get through it in the best way for your nonprofit.
Yeah, our trustee, so, the company is owned by an ESOP trust, which has a trustee. He loves the example of, like, he comes and speaks at our annual company meeting every year. And he asks, okay, how many of you, rented a car in the last 2 years? All people raise their hands. Okay, who went and washed that car? Who went and got that car washed? And all the hands go down. It's like, why didn't you wash your rental car? Like, because you didn't own it. So there's just a level of care and concern that comes from owning something that our employees feel about the company, about community IT, and especially about the work that we do. They're working for themselves. They're working for, they are the ones who own the company. And so they have a more deeply vested interest in the quality of the work that we do.
I think that's a great place to leave it for happy ESOP month. A great explanation of what an ESOP is and how community IT became an ESOP and just all of the benefits, both for us as staff owners, and for our clients.
Thanks, Carolyn.
Thank you. Thanks, Johan.
Community IT does these free webinars and podcasts for our community, and we love sharing our knowledge and experience. If you have more questions or are having trouble with your IT at your nonprofit, please get in touch with us on our website, www.communityit.com, so we can start a conversation or schedule an assessment. Downloading any of our free resources there will get you signed up for our webinar reminders, and you can attend our next webinar in real time and ask our experts your own questions. If you love podcasts, please subscribe and leave us a rating to help others find this leadership resource for nonprofits.